The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. This reflects on the times of Sun Tzu. During the warring states of China, states would rise and fall within a single war, or even a single battle. Hence war was quite literally life or death, and had to be treated as such. To Sun Tzu, wars were all or nothing, in which only one state would walk out alive. This can be compared to the unconditional surrender policy of the Allies during the Second World War. During the Casablanca Conference in 1943, the Allies stated that they would only accept unconditional surrender from the Axis. In other words, the Allies would drive toward total and complete victory in the face of total war. The art of war, then, is governed by 5 constant factors, to be taken into account in one's deliberations, when seeking to determine the conditions obtaining in the field. These are: 1. The moral law. 2. Heaven. 3. The earth. 4. The commander. 5. Method and discipline. We will now look at each of these factors in turn. The moral law causes the people to be in complete accord with their ruler, so that they will follow him regardless of their lives, undismayed by any danger. In other words, during war, the ruler must have the complete backing of the people, in order to fight the war the most efficiently. How the ruler achieves that can be through benevolent or malevolent means. They must utilize their resources, whether it be blood or steel, to the fullest extent to prosecute the war. Some examples of this include Winston Churchill, whose fiery speeches such as "Their finest hour, blood, toil, tears and sweat, or we shall fight on the beaches" galvanized the British war effort, and inspired the people of Britannia to resist the wave of fascism at all costs. You've also got Charles de Gaulle, who used British radio, while in exile during the fall of France, to keep the flame of French resistance alight. Heaven signifies night and day, cold and heat, times, and seasons. Obviously the time and weather at the site of battle is going to significantly affect the outcome. Compare the scorching deserts of North Africa to the cold frost of the Eastern Front during the Second World War. They are 2 completely different scenarios. One example of successfully using heaven to your advantage is the 1700 Battle of Narva in the Great Northern War. A Swedish army of 10,000 under their King Charles XII were preparing to assault a Russian army of nearly 40,000 to relieve the besieged city of Narva, in modern-day Estonia. I think extra credits, in their series on the Great Northern War, do a great job at explaining how the Swedes use the winter weather to their advantage.
The sky darkened. A storm rolled in, the snow was pouring in sheets, sleet slashing at the troops. The blizzard blinded both sides. Fighting was impossible. Men stood shivering in regimental formation, weapons at the ready for a battle that wasn't gonna come. Charles's advisors suggested that he call off the assault, but then the roaring wind began to turn, and Charles's keen eyes saw it. During this brief window, the enemy would be entirely blinded by the snow. He ordered the advance.
With the snow masking their charge, the Swedish lines crashed into and shattered the Russian positions. It was a complete victory, with more than 10,000 Russians killed or wounded at the cost of less than 2,000 Swedes. Hence a victory that successfully utilized the weather. Earth comprises distances, great and small, danger and security, open ground and narrow passes, the chances of life and death. Utilizing the local terrain can contribute greatly to victory in battle. Simply look at battles such as Gettysburg in 1863, Agincourt in 1415, Waterloo in 1815, or Teutoburg Forest in 9. But this doesn't apply simply to the field of battle, but logistics as well. For example, let's take a look at Rasputitsa. This is a term for the Russian seasons, where travel becomes hell, as the mud and snow makes roads difficult to travel across, to say the least. The Russians used this defensive advantage to great effect, slowing down Napoleon's invasion of Russia and Hitler's Operation Barbarossa to buy time for the counterattack. The commander stands for the virtues of wisdom, honesty, benevolence, courage, and strictness. These are 5 qualities Sun Tzu believes a good general should have. Wisdom to understand what to, and what not to do. Honesty to stay true to yourself. Benevolence to help those you don't need to harm. Courage to overcome fears. Strictness to enforce discipline. One example of a leader with these qualities could be the Kurdish Sultan Saladin. Most famous for his brilliant victory at Hattin, where he wiped out a crusader army of 20,000 and capturing the holy city of Jerusalem. He also fought off the Third Crusade, where he gained a reputation for his mercifulness and generosity, the epitome of chivalry. By method and discipline are to be understood the marshalling of the army in its proper subdivisions, the graduations of rank among the officers, the maintenance of roads by which supplies may reach the army, and the control of military expenditure. This section acknowledges the importance of a clear and organized chain of command during war, in order to make sure everyone knows what they are doing. For example, let's look at the mission type structure, which utilizes flexibility and allows subordinate commanders relative freedom to achieve a clear-cut objective with whatever means given. This type of command was used most famously during the Franco-Prussian War by forces under Prussian Field Marshal von Moltke, as well as in the early stages of World War II via the German Blitzkrieg. But this doesn't apply just to war as well, but logistics, especially with the part of the quote saying the maintenance of roads by which supplies may reach the army. This is seen via the Battle of Ulm, where Napoleon outmaneuvered the Austrians after a rapid march from Calais to southwest Germany. It was after this battle Napoleon famously said, "I have destroyed the Austrian army by simply marching." So you must study them when laying your plans and thoroughly understand their relevance. By this I mean you should consider, which ruler has the stronger moral law? Which general has most ability? Which side is best favored by climate and terrain? Which army is stronger? Whose officers and men are the better trained? Who best understands the use of reward and punishment? The answers to these questions tell me who will succeed and who will be defeated. These are factors Sun Tzu believes will decide which of 2 states will win the war. However, war is chaos, and you never know what might happen. In my opinion, these factors determine which side has a higher chance of victory, but nothing is certain. You should retain those of your generals who heed this advice, for they will be victorious. You should dismiss those who do not, for they will be defeated. This is straightforward, determining which generals you should keep, and which you should ditch. However, keep in mind that a general that studies these strategies is not the same as a general who uses them. You want a general who successfully utilizes the lessons learned. While heeding the profit of my counsel, avail yourself also of any helpful circumstances over and beyond the ordinary rules. According as circumstances are favorable, one should modify one's plans. This again ties back to von Moltke the Elder's famous adage, "No plan of operations extends with certainty beyond the first encounter with the enemy's main strength." Sun Tzu asks that the general should adapt to their situation and utilize any local advantages, and be quick to change your strategy. The art of war is not meant to be a set-in-stone textbook, and should not be blindly followed as one. One example of successfully adapting to local conditions is the American assault on Utah Beach during D-Day. When the United forces landed, they realized they had arrived at the wrong beach. However, they quickly realized that the beach they landed on was a better landing position than the beach originally assigned, so they decided to start the war there. Utah Beach, despite its initial confusion, was the first Allied beach taken. All warfare is based on deception. This is one of, if not the most important quote of The Art of War, as it deals with likely the most crucial part of war, intelligence, or information. More specifically, what you do, and what you don't know. If you knew everything, decisions would be very easy. But you are never going to know everything about the current situation you find yourself in, but it's up to you to properly utilize what information you have to the fullest extent. This is what separates good and bad generals, how efficiently they use what limited information they have. Now, if you can get your enemies to use false information as real information, then that's amazing. This is where the deception part comes in. You will force your enemy to commit resources to an area different from the region you are planning to make a move in, whether it be through concealment or feints. Let's take a look at some examples in history. First off, Operation Fortitude. When the Allies in World War II were planning Operation Overlord, or the invasion of Normandy, they knew they would have to deceive the Germans on the details of it. See, the question was never if the Allies would invade, rather it was a matter of where. The Allies used phantom armies stationed in northern and southeast England to convince the Germans that the main attack would come at occupied Norway or Pas-de-Calais. These phantom armies employed dummy planes and tanks and boats. Radio stations in England fed streams of uncoded radio messages that contained false information for the Germans to read. The Allies turned German spies into double agents, and constantly fed the Axis information on an Allied invasion on Pas-de-Calais and diversions at Norway and some place called Normandy. It's amazing how much the Allies put into deceiving the Germans, and in the end, by reading crack German Enigma codes, they could tell they were amazingly successful. Operation Fortitude was one of the main reasons D-Day succeeded, and with it, the Allied war effort. Here's another example, one less known compared to Operation Fortitude, but in my opinion just as amazing. In 1943, when the Allies were planning on invading the Italian island of Sicily, they undertook a deception operation known as Operation Mincemeat. The Germans knew there was going to be a major Allied operation in the Mediterranean, but the question was again where. The actual Allied objective was Sicily, but they wanted to deceive the Germans into thinking the target was not Sicily. Hence, Operation Mincemeat went into effect. What the Allies did was take a selected dead body and disguise it as a Royal Marine Major that died in an air crash. However, this corpse, named William Martin, carried letters and documents that falsely suggested that the Allies were going to invade Greece or even Sardinia, with a diversionary attack on Sicily. Very sneaky. On the 17th of April 1943, the body was released off the shore of Spain and soon enough, the Spanish government got the documents. Now, Spain was supposed to be neutral in World War II, but was more so aligned to the Axis. As such, Spain shared the intel with Germany, and did Germany catch the bait? Soon after they received this information, the Germans doubled the number of troops on Sardinia, moved more than 8 divisions to Greece, 10 to the Balkans, but none to Sicily. By the time the German commanders realized what they did, it was too late, and Sicily was captured by the Allies in a little over a month. I know I ranted a bit, but I hope this gives an impression on just how powerful of a weapon deception can be. Hence, when you are able to act, feign incapacity, when deploying, feign inactivity, when you are close, appear far off, when you are distant, appear close. Deployment is one of the most important parts of any military operation. Troops can't fight and capture objectives if they don't get to a starting point. Therefore, It's crucial it goes smoothly, and one way to ensure it is to conceal it the best you can. The first example that comes to mind for me is the Russia doctrine of Maskirovka. Prior to large-scale operations, the Red Army would hide troop movements by hiding reserves, moving during the night, positioning tanks hull down, etc. to conceal the flow of men and material. Considering the scale of it all, it was very impressive, and led the Germans to greatly underestimate the true number of Soviet strength. Maskirovka was used to great effect during the Soviet counterattacks at Stalingrad, the defenses of Kursk, and the obliteration of the German Army Group Center during Operation Bagration. When your enemy seeks an advantage, lure him further. If he is in disorder, crush him. In other words, draw your enemy out, and punish overconfidence or overextension. Especially if the enemy is high on victory fever. We see many examples of this in history, such as Gettysburg, Little Big Horn, or the Swedish/French/Nazi invasions of Russia. If he is organized, be ready for him. When he is strong, avoid him. There is nothing cowardly about not fighting a force superior to yours. Choose and pick your fights carefully. One example of this is the Fabian strategy of Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus. Following devastating defeats at Trebia and Lake Trasimene at the hands of Hannibal in the Second Punic War, the Romans appointed Fabius as dictator. He purposely avoided pitched battle against Hannibal, instead wearing the Carthaginians down and disrupting their logistics, but above all, never accepting battle head-on. While unpopular among the Roman people, it did much damage to Hannibal's army. When he is angry, goad him further. If he is humble, be overbearing. If he is resting, harry him. If his armies are united, split them. I think this clip of the Southern theater of the American Revolution may help explain this quote. Credits to Oversimplified and his episodes on the American Revolution.
Alrighty, let's go with your guy. Nathaniel Greene knew the British outnumbered his own forces and wouldn't be defeated with conventional tactics, so he had to think outside the box. He split his army into two, said, "Hey big boy, look at me," and then they went running in two different directions. Cornwallis sent Tarleton after Morgan, and he caught up with him at Cowpens, where Morgan proceeded to kick Tarleton's butt. Then the two led Cornwallis on a wild chase through North Carolina, his bigger and better equipped army much heavier and slower than Greene's quick and mobile troops.
What exactly did the Americans do? They split the British, harried the British supply lines, goaded the British to overextend. Just as Sun Tzu suggests, Chinese revolutionary Mao Zedong has a similar quote to this, saying the enemy advances, we retreat, the enemy camps, we harass, the enemy tires, we attack, the enemy retreats, we pursue. Attack where he is unprepared, appear where you are least expected. So you remember from the section on Fabius there is this guy called Hannibal? Well, he's one of the greatest military commanders ever, and one of his feats perfectly represent this quote. At the start of the Second Punic War, in order to bring the war to the Romans, this dude decides to march an entire army through the Alps, the mountain range. Hannibal marched 30,000 men plus war elephants across the highest mountain range in Europe, in 5 months. Everyone thought it was impossible and it completely caught Rome by surprise. If that isn't appearing where you aren't least expected, I don't know what is. Thus you may see that in war, surprise is the key to victory. Another great military theorist, the Prussian Karl von Clausewitz, the author of On War, also has an adage similar to this, stating, "We say, surprise lies at the foundation of all undertakings without exception, only in very different degrees according to the nature of the undertaking and other circumstances." This concludes Sun Tzu's section in this chapter on deception. A victorious leader plans for many eventualities before the battle, a defeated leader plans for only a few. Many options bring victory, few options bring defeat, no options at all spell disaster. Be ready for many outcomes. In the ever-changing world of war, Situations can change in a second. Give yourself multiple options in battle, so that even if plan A goes wrong, you still have plan B to give yourself victory. And even if the battle is lost, still give yourself an option to withdraw in good order, rather than completely collapsing. One example of not taking into account many options would be Nazi Germany's Operation Barbarossa, or their invasion of the USSR. And I think Potential History's video of the planning of Operation Barbarossa explains it better than I ever could. Roll the clip.
German commanders really thought that the Soviet Union was in such a weakened state that they would drive in as far as Minsk or at the furthest Smolensk and would have destroyed the Red Army and its command structure to the point that no organized resistance would be possible, and that the remaining conquest would just be a smooth march through the Soviet Union, hence the rather short deadlines. And the potential problems to do with lack of supplies and potential lack of ability to transport those supplies as they got further and further away from their jumping off point would be mitigated as resistance would be small and sporadic, so large quantities of ammunition and replacements would not be required. The most outstanding thing, though, is that the Germans have absolutely no contingency plan for if things don't work out like this. They are literally assuming that they are so good that after their initial operations, their enemy is not going to be able to recover and that they'll just give up. And they're confident enough in this that they 100% plan for it. And knowing this, a lot of the things that we'll discuss later on begin to make a lot more sense.
And that's one of the reasons Germany lost World War II. No backup plan, no option besides forward. And let's end this with the final quote in the first chapter of The Art of War. It is by using all these considerations that I can foresee who will be victorious and who will be defeated.